Hi everyone, welcome back. The conversation that you are about to watch is with my friend Pei Vio. Pei is a Canadian author based in Montreal at the moment. His works include Searching for Marilyn Monroe, collection of stories, and The Peril in Decline, which is a novella. Pei is also an amazing YouTuber. He has a YouTube channel. I wouldn't say I think he might also resist to that title. He has a really great YouTube channel. He's one of those people that every single one of his videos is a source of joy and learning for me. I recently came across this collection of essays by Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre, titled Occasional Philosophical Writings. There are only four short essays, and since Pei knows way more about existentialism and Sartre especially than I do, I thought it would be great to talk with him about these. And thankfully, he accepted my invitation. So, this video is about the first essay in this collection, which is titled Cartesian Freedom. And I hope you enjoy it. I enjoyed it a lot. It's a very casual, informal chat about what we read. And in the next part will be about intentionality, a fundamental idea of Husserl's phenomenology. Feel free to join and join in reading as well. You've been studying Sartre for the past 15 years.
Yeah, well, one of the many that I have. Sartre was one of the first that I really got into. I mean, seriously, only the past about 10. I mean, I've been studying this for longer than that. It just not really seriously. Well, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, I always put Sartre up there with one of the people that I study the most, despite not really agreeing with much of what he has to say, or at least I find issues with the way he says certain things, which I'll even be able to point out with a few in this very essay. But
Yeah, maybe we can
but
start there. Like the reason why we enjoy reading him, there is an
yeah,
energy in his writing.
yeah,
And something
the
that has always surprised me about Sartre is how often I walk into a secondhand bookstore and I see these titles, these like random titles on books, and then the author is Sartre. He's not just the author of like 4 or 5 of his well-known works. He has like these biographies, these
mhm.
essays. He has a book on short book on Merleau-Ponty, uh, and the critique of what is that? The 2-volume work, critique of
Oh,
speculative reason or
yeah,
dialectical reason.
the dialectical read. Yeah, that is the one thing that I have not read, or that I have found that I can't, that I know that I should read of his, but I cannot find that book though either. But I can find like volume one, or no, volume two, I think it is. I find here and there, usually going for $160. Something. I'm like, oh, I can't. So I've found pieces here and there online, but that's a difficult text to find. I guess they're
Mhm.
releasing both volumes soon, and I can see it on Amazon whenever I go to look for it, but it's just not released yet. And so
Mhm.
I have not actually read that one, but yeah, he's got a lot of I mean, yeah, you're right. People typically, when you think of Sartre, you think of being in nothingness and nausea,
Mm.
usually. But his the psychology of imagination is one of my favorites he's done.
Mhm.
That's a great little work. But yeah, he's got quite a bit.
Yeah, yeah. So we have for this conversation, I suggested we turn to a not so short, but short essay, a standalone essay called Cartesian Freedom. So maybe we can start by talking about why would someone be interested in this essay? Why would anyone um, read this?
Well, it's an earlier essay that he kind of showcases a little glimpse of what you're eventually going to get in Being in Nothingness, specifically chapter 5, Being, Doing, and Freedom, I believe it's called, and where he develops a lot of these earlier ideas in far more detail, and very, very well thought out. And I would recommend reading it very quickly before jumping into say a chapter that the specific chapter I'm talking about, in Being in Nothingness, where he really does flesh out this idea far more. It's just it's easier to get through, more and you could kind of start getting used to his language, because he has a very roundabout way of it. It sounds very repetitive, but it's not as repetitive as one thinks, but it
Yeah.
does, but it has just the way in which it needs to be expressed to the
Right.
word. It is very repetitive.
It's very helpful. The repetitiveness I found very helpful, because he overshadows certain things that he will say later also in the essay, and he kind of confirms his position later on. I'm curious. Also, I wanted to ask you two things. One is, what stood out for you this time that you read the essay? And second, this might be a weird question to ask, but I would really love to know how your reading was influenced by your current position and the other things you're thinking about, the other things that you've been reading, because those always influence and frame our reading of a given text. Like if you're reading Husserl, or if you're reading Hegel, like, so those kinds of like historical aspects of reading.
Well, yeah. I'm currently I am reading very meticulously, going through the greater logic of Hegel's Greater Logic, and so yeah, naturally you just kind of want to read into whatever else you're going to be reading with the text you are. And of course he does have, I think it's near the beginning here, where he talks about the truth and the whole. I tried, though, this time when reading this essay, to kind of block out everything that I have been reading recently, because I knew that it would kind of distort things in a way that I'd be reading things into it that just simply weren't there. Especially with Sartre, and how even how knowing how much he I don't want to say misreads, but misrepresents maybe Hegel, especially Sartre's does this strange thing in which he'll take many ideas and I was just purposely misread them to present his own idea. You see this a lot done in poetry, where it might not be the intent of the author, but the one interpreting knows it's going to get their point across much clearer if they interpret it in a certain manner. And again, in Being in Nothingness, there's that whole section where he goes through Husserl, then Heidegger, or Husserl, then Hegel, then Heidegger. He puts Hegel, after Husserl, because he believes that he's made advances where Husserl didn't. But at the same time, everything where Sartre believes that Hegel would make more advanced ideas in this particular field, is just simply him attributing things that aren't actually in those works. Or he's just I want to say he does this on purpose, just to get his point, because he's one of those people that despite getting, like, just for simplicity's sake, despite getting everything wrong, he comes out on the other end with a far more original idea than he himself may have even thought he was putting forward. And so that's another reason why I do quite like him a lot, is because that's a very strange way to go about it, but it somehow works for him.
Yeah, especially here, what he's doing is very close to deconstruction. He is reading on the margins of Descartes' idea of freedom and necessity. And he reads on the margin of Discourse on Method, where Descartes is talking about inventing his method one step at a time. And he says,
Yeah.
oh, see, look, he's like, that's very like reading on the margins of Descartes.
Yeah, I was gonna say something very much like that. He's applying these kind of existential, more modern notions toward Descartes. I have it somewhere in my notes, right, where I mentioned.
So do you think that those are foreign to Descartes himself, or maybe he's forcing a little bit?
I think he would be forcing this because for Descartes, the freedom would come at looking at it, freedom's responsibility toward truth, which is essentially getting to the epistemology of this, whereas Sartre is then applying his kind of more of something that is more ontologically posterior to what essence. So putting these things together will just result in well, it's just really not what Descartes was really getting at. It's just a very different way of looking at freedom. Essentially, he's trying to reconcile their two ideas of freedom, but considering they both have these, one takes in, of course, Descartes believes that God has given us these pre-established essences, and we have the freedom to search out the truth within these. Whereas Sartre is of course, the famous existence precedes essence. So we don't have these two things can't be reconciled. And so he's trying to bring these two things together, which just simply can't be done. And I think he does so by applying these more modern existential thoughts onto Descartes that wasn't actually there.
I do see this tension. It seems as if these two things are really wrestling with each other. The idea of, on the one hand, recognizing certain facts as being the case, recognizing certain truths, and then the moment we take a step in that direction, it seems like we are accepting certain constraints on our choices, because our choices should be mindful or in accordance with the truths we recognize. And being in accordance with something immediately is like limiting. It would be a limitation. But so that on the recognition of truths on the one hand, and then being an exercise of freedom. And Sartre really is, I think, more concerned, more than, this is one thing that differentiates them, maybe superficially, Descartes and Sartre. Sartre is really concerned with the expression of freedom, like the expression of freedom in a way that we can detect it as freedom, not just as an act, not just as being in accordance with something, or being in discord with something, but that being a sign of freedom. Whereas Descartes, like, yeah, he's okay with that, because he's not as concerned. He's okay with saying things like, we are never as free as when we are, confirming a truth, or, morally, a Kantian version of it, morally being, doing something that is good, just. So he's comfortable with that. But there's something about existentialism that is, I think, essentially uncomfortable with that way of like, yeah, but you're in harmony with something. So that's why I asked you a question about the other influences around the contingent readings around it, because I've been reading the logical investigations of Husserl, and I see Husserl being on the side of Descartes here. I see him more of as especially in the logical investigations. He's all about finding a system of interconnected truths and then being in accordance with them.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. Husserl has of course, his Cartesian meditations, in which he goes forward from on after the first two meditations of Descartes, thinking this is Descartes opened the door for transcendental philosophy, but he kind of abandons it after the second meditation, and there would be he would be completely in agreement with this pre-established method, in which one follows to then go forward from there. So I think, yeah, I would completely agree with that, especially in Husserl's Cartesian meditations. Well, in everything, because I mean, he's following the same phenomenological method, of course, in there as well, despite the slight differences here and there, from especially from there to ideas. He makes a few changes, one in which Sartre agrees with, one in which Sartre disagrees with, but that comes up more in the second essay in this little volume.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so Pei, something I did since we started this conversation was I started jumping in with some questions with like how I would frame the essay. So let's take a step back, and I would like to give you the space to see like how shall we enter into or re-enter into the essay, into thinking about the essay. How would you if there's a different way you would like to approach or frame? Because I kind of, the person who starts talking, especially the way I did it, which is uncharacteristic of me, is like, okay, let's talk about this in terms of this opposition, or in terms of this question. So I'd like to like practice epoche, or like suspension of suspension of our
Just
yeah.
suspend the judgment a little bit. Well, I guess my question would be what, because as I said earlier, and I could be wrong in this, and if someone wanted to disagree, I would definitely be open to hearing that. My main question would be to what exactly is Sartre's overall goal in even doing, like I said, stated earlier, he's trying to almost seem to he's trying to point out a difference between his notions of freedom and Descartes, which it most certainly is, and then he seems to be trying to reconcile them to a degree, but the reasons for doing this seem as I stated earlier, the fundamental issue with this is that issue of essence, and now their views on this completely brings the two very much apart. So I don't really know what the point of wanting to do this would be. Sartre's notions on freedom could stand on their own. It almost seems unnecessary to try to reconcile this Cartesian notion.
Yeah,
but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's just simply not what he's doing at all, and just simply bringing out these differences. But you read it and you get the sense he is trying to do this.
I think for any thinker who develops a position, they would feel the urge, maybe they will feel the not temptation, but the desire to show how come other people, especially major thinkers, have come to different positions. How is it that Descartes has a different view of freedom, or is talking about freedom in a different way than I do? And to me, it was really helpful to point out that Descartes looks at human beings primarily as knowers and as scientists or proto-scientists. And that way of thinking about human beings shapes the way they consider their freedom, as opposed to if you think about a human person as an actor primarily, or a creator. So that framing of a human being. So I found that part helpful, like to distinguish himself or his way of thinking about freedom from Descartes.
Yeah.
Helped
Uh,
clarify, yeah, his own position and Descartes' position. And then, but of course, he comes at the end to these this he adopts a tone of a little bit maybe condescending. It's like, yeah, we should forgive Descartes for these other things.
yeah,
He's
yeah, yeah,
he
yeah.
shouldn't
It's
overshadow his greatness.
But it's funny too that final line that he says in this essay, maybe Descartes is attributing that to God, which he should be attributing to man, which is a very strange thing to say, because if you just take Descartes' position, the opposite of that is equally true. Descartes could just say that, when you're attributing this to man, that should be rightly attributed to God, and then Descartes could just start, since that was his where the basis of where he was starting of what of this truth, this pure being of truth is, it would make just as much sense for Descartes just to say this. So in other words, we're almost just right at the beginning. He ends this essay off at the very beginning where we started. It's like, well, this is what you were trying to distinguish, but you just, the whole entire essay could almost just be summed up in that last sentence, and okay, well, that's the question. Now where do you go from there? But yeah, but on your point, it's where Descartes is more concerned with epistemology. Sartre uses the phenomenological method to reach a fundamental ontology, and again, that's where they're just doing two different things. They're speaking two different languages. Sartre is trying to move Descartes into to his language, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, right. Now you say they're doing two different things. Do you imply that? Does that imply that you see them as potentially being able to exist side by side? You do your thing over here, and I do my thing over here.
uh,
We can peacefully coexist, because I think I will, if that's the case, then I would like to challenge that.
no.
But first let me
As
know.
soon as you asked that question, I realized I worded that so terribly that is what I would have suggested. Not necessarily.
Okay.
I mean, it is possible that yes, that could be done, but because their views on other fundamental issues are so separate, not necessarily for this case.
Right.
Yes, I apologize. I worded
Oh,
that kind of very ambiguously, and so, but
no, I actually I understand the kind of peaceful coexistence position. That's really great. But at the same time, I mean, practically, trivially, let's say there are two philosophers who are holding classes at the same time, like Hegel and Schopenhauer.
that's who I first came to mind when you said that.
Practically, we can go to just one of the two. So we have to, but it's not that trivial. The point I want to raise is a little bit, hopefully, a little bit deeper than that. I think what I detect in Sartre, especially when he says in, I think, page 3 or 5, it's one of those odd number pages, where he talks about freedom as the thing that all humans share in common, and that they don't differ at all in the degree to which, with respect to how much they are free. We are all free in the same way. So he's using freedom as a common ground for all of us.
Yes, and
Everybody else.
yeah, and this is exactly what I meant when I said he's applying these existential kind of notions onto this.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know if I interrupted you. I didn't mean
So
to.
just to finish that, an epistemologist like, especially Husserl, fresh in my mind, he also wants to create or point out common grounds, so you and I, everybody else, can come together and start with a system of interconnected truths, or some propositions, or the way we think about truth. So that could be, because it's really important. It matters that we come together. It really matters that we come together and have like starting points of agreement, and then beyond that we can disagree, we can talk, but reasons for which we can coexist. Those are really important. And for Sartre, it is the reasons that we come together are different kinds of reasons. They have more to do with action. They have more to do with like celebrating this creative potential.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly the case. And on page 4 to 5, which did you have the same edition I have here?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So on page 4 to 5, and this is the part where I was saying where I think where I thought Hegel was coming in and to go more on your point there, just to further that, where it states, in the later case, man disappears and no difference remains between thought and truth. The true is the totality of the system of ideas. So it would make this very Hegelian idea would just you want to reconcile these things, and no matter, but is there going to be, no matter what, whether one would try to force that. You don't need to force it. The history of ideas is just the ongoing unfolding of the one truth that is the whole being of truth. It's so trying to find these connections might be helpful, it might be in such a sense, but I think it's missing. Trying to connect it is missing the point that this is just a natural thing that occurs. It doesn't need to be forced in that Hegelian, in a Hegelian sense, but it's just the unfolding of history, really.
Right.
But again, that might be me reading into it now, and now it's just off a bit.
No. I think that makes sense to me. That makes sense. So going back to that absolute freedom, do you have like a response to that when Sartre talks about human freedom in that way? I recalled something I read from Augustine, where he says, he has to reconcile the fact that God is always there with us, always here, but then we might be distant in an asymmetrical way. He is with me, but I am far from him through my own confusions. So forgetting Augustine, now Sartre, in Sartrean language, I might be free. My freedom is here, but I might be distant from my freedom, from my humanity, which is to say, like from my own capacities, the things that are truly mine.
Yeah. Well, Sartre, he's very careful in distinguishing between this biological determinism, which he does accept, but and then distinguishing between what one would typically call what one would typically call free will and freedom, and the human beings aren't just free; we are in itself freedom, and then this is so. I'm trying to word how you like, because it's a very so he essentially, as Merleau-Ponty actually points out in the final chapter of Phenomenology of Perception, Sartre does actually end up falling back into a kind of Cartesianism, at least a Cartesian duality in which his two modes of being for itself and being in itself, are kind of playing off one another. So in this way, you have kind of what you were expressing. They're very separate, but also very connected, in the same way that almost that Descartes is realized freedom with the absolute being of God. So you have the absolute in the being in which you're acting off of, just the same as Sartre is with the being in itself and the being for itself. So they're actually not as different as one may think. They're just not as similar in the way that Sartre is trying to make it in this essay, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's you open up another topic, which is this topic of sometimes a philosopher looks at another philosopher and says, oh, see that thing that they tried to do, they did it for a brief moment and then they fell back. Sartre does that too. It's just you describe Merleau-Ponty's description of Sartre, but Sartre did that for Descartes. He said Descartes got a glimpse of this freedom, and only in the form of a negative freedom.
Yes.
And then he falls back. And many people say that about Descartes.
Well, it's funny too that he that such, because I see that's where I would disagree with Sartre on that. And this isn't Descartes, and it's weird. He describes this notion as this little bit of negativity as a negativity, because it's not a negativity. The cogito and is not as I said, or as he puts it, a translucent refusal of everything which reaches itself, but it's the assertion of one thing. Cogito ergo sum. This is a positive, not a negative. And so it's strange that Sartre attributes this as being that little glimpse of the negative of the action. This does create that ergo sum, as he had put it.
But the cogito itself, according to Sartre, is itself that negativity. It is not a thing that you could point to in a positive way. You cannot posit it.
Yeah.
Because it posits, and it itself is a negativity that can posit. So yeah, I see your criticism, but I can also imagine Sartre saying like, yeah, it is positing something, but what is positing is negativity. I had another response to that. This whole human freedom as negative or detached. On this is something I marked as on page 5. I wasn't sure when I first read it. I wasn't sure what he's talking about here. But if you read the whole essay, it's clear what he's doing. Starting on the second line of page 5, he says, if one wants to rescue man, all that remains, after this Cartesian project, all that remains, since he cannot produce any ideas, but merely contemplate them, is to endow him with a simple negative power, the power to say no to everything that isn't the truth. And so in the guise of a unitary doctrine, we find two rather different theories of freedom in Descartes, depending on two different theories of freedom in Descartes, depending on whether he's looking at his power to understand and to judge, or simply wishing to rescue man's autonomy in its confrontation with the rigorous system of ideas. So my first reading of it was wrong, but it was more exciting to me, that I thought he just wants to say, no, this is really human freedom, is to say no.
Yeah, that was your first thought of.
Yeah.
That was what I thought, and I think he kind of
that would have been great.
Yeah, no, and what and that would, and I think that, like, and then he has that one line later on where he says, what is it? It's one of my favorite lines in the whole, where he says, one must live to refuse until one can refuse no longer,
right,
or something along that. Which going back to what you're saying, I think I was like, yeah, that would be great. And yeah, that was what I thought when I had first read this as well.
He would have been maybe working out the implications of the Cartesian ideas. Yeah, I don't know why that was so appealing to me, because let's imagine that we have this totality of truth. This is totality of a system of truth, and if you apprehend it, if you understand it, you have to agree with it. So there's no elbow room there. But you still have the ability to say no.
Yeah,
And there's
yeah.
something about that.
Yeah, I think this is a very modern argument for libertarianism that I've heard, and I've been hearing a lot more about it recently. So this is probably why when I first read that, where I was like, oh, so this is kind of the groundwork for these more modern ideas. But yeah, it's um,
Not because we want to destroy something or to do something other than what the system is demanding from us, but
yeah.
to have that pause and then to re-engage after that.
Yeah. Even just the awareness that we have that capability
Yeah, yeah,
is enough to ensure that kind of freedom.
yeah,
Which is
yeah. Even though overtly, superficially, two people might be the same in what they're doing, but one of them is more deliberate because they have had that pause.
right.
But the thing is, if we do accept that, then we have to disagree with Sartre in his statement that everybody is free in this to the same degree, because it's about the practice. It's about how much we are utilizing that capacity. So that's the biggest challenge for me, is to see the universality of freedom in the same way that Sartre is proposing. It just doesn't. I'm unable to see it as universal. Unless he is talking about something that is in potential in all of us, then okay. But
Well, it's well, it's for Sartre, one is that the famous quote. He says, "One is condemned to be free." You know, you're not free to not be free. Everything, you create yourself in the actions, and the essence of an individual is produced through these actions as they continue, no matter what that is. So this idea that of saying no is essentially what you're doing all the time. This no in one direction is yes in another direction. So when if I'm refusing so if I say, if I do accept this whatever pre-established truth that might be, I am saying no in a sense. Even if I accept this pre-established truth, I'm saying just no in the other direction.
right, right.
And so you're doing that no matter what you do, and you can't help but do that, which is
Oh,
kind of straight, because then it sounds like, well, then that doesn't sound like freedom at all. Except it is, because that in itself goes back. It's a very weird circular kind of thing that confirms itself by just doing it.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And so no matter what, you're going to have to make that choice.
mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. That even if you submit your will, you are still saying no to the other possibility of, you're saying no to no, basically,
Yes, yeah.
or
The
to your
negation of the
capacity.
negation is
Yeah, yeah.
kind of that it's still something.
And is there a consequential, significant difference between those two? I remember this one of the dialogues of Anselm, Anselm of Canterbury.
Hmm.
He talks about the rectitude of the will. He says that there are, in our choices, imagine we have two options. One of the options is in accordance with who we are, our nature, our, according to Anselm, with the truth. And if we follow that, if we decide that, then we will cultivate this rectitude. We will preserve it. But another option is, if we choose the other option, which is not in accordance with the truth, we will damage this capacity. We will do damage to the rectitude of the will. And if we go on along that path of doing things that are, again, incompatible, inconsistent with the truth, our nature, what justice, we might just lose it. I don't know. It's
Yeah,
that's yeah.
no, correct me if I'm wrong, but that sounds on page, I guess, 16 of this essay, where he's kind of saying something. Descartes, there's
Mm.
this quote he takes from Descartes, I guess is from a letter from
Oh
one of
yeah.
his one of where the will does not incline toward evil except insofar that evil is represented by the understanding as being in some way good. And
Yeah.
so it's you wouldn't actually ever accept evil. You freely choose evil because it appears as something that's not evil. And nobody chooses evil, but that's where freedom lies, is again that saying no. Of course, this would be to Descartes saying no to the truth, is still acting in freedom, but you're never, that's why you're never more free when you're in accordance with truth,
Hmm.
because you freely go there, whereas you're kind of just, when you're rejecting it, that is going back into to I guess what he would consider evil here.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so you're damaging, as you put it, you're damaging that inclination toward free choice.
Yeah. Which yeah. So it's possible to say no to truth as untruth, or or but while it's impossible to say no to truth as truth if you recognize
If
it.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, according to what's being said and interpreted here, that
Hmm.
I think is what they're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, that's really impressive how many in this short essay he makes references to so many different ways, so many different works by Descartes.
He
His
does, and
letters.
I'm surprised he never brings up, or does he? I know he brings up principles somewhere,
Hmm.
but he doesn't bring up the sections in which Descartes talks about free will in principles. Is section 30, 32, 34. Let me find it here. Yeah, 34 and 35. Uh, but
Yeah,
but
that's interesting.
which Descartes really gives a very clear definition of what he's calling freedom, but I don't think he actually mentions that one.
Hmm.
But other than that, and there's certain things he brings up which, having everything of Descartes, I there's one letter in which I could not find where because I was trying to find every little spot that he brings up here, except I could not find this one letter he mentions, and I don't know where he got it, as I don't know if that's just missing from the complete works I have here, or not, but there is a letter here in which I have no clue where. Yeah, on page 8, that letter from 1638.
Okay. That title of that letter A and then
Yeah, and
star.
it's missing. So I thought it was the letter he wrote in response to Arnold, from the objections of the
Hmm.
meditations, and that's what I assumed, but that wasn't it, because I read
Hmm.
through that and there's nothing there. So I don't know where that letter comes from or who that was directed to,
Hmm.
but which
Yeah.
is too bad, because it sounds like I would have loved to read the full context of that, because it's a very interesting little excerpt he pulls out there.
Hmm. There's nothing that is entirely within our power except our thoughts. That is at
Hmm.
least the case if one takes the word thought, as I do, for all the operations of the soul. Okay, yeah, 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 yeah. I remember all the operations of the soul.
Yeah. So of course, I would have thought. Well, I know he tried to remove the word thought from the principles in section 60, 64, 65. I think he tried to remove the word thought because he thought it didn't say what he was trying to say. Essentially, thought being the one mode of res cogitans. the substance there, in the same sense that extension is the one mode of res extensa, and thought, of course, would be the one thing that then expresses, all its different. Sorry, I said the same mode, but attribute. It's the one attribute to mind that expresses all the different kinds of modes, such as doubt and imagination, memory, and so on. Mm-hmm. And so he does look at the word thought very differently than what we would typically see as the word thought. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of interesting. But
yeah,
that's it's kind of a
actually that even just that passage itself shows his appreciation of the so-called embodied cognition, which is, it's really funny. In embodied cognition as a field of research, contemporary research, their target, the ultimate target that they identify as the mistaken position, is what they call the Cartesian position of disembodied mind, disembodied cognition. So
the which, sorry, I think I missed what you said at the beginning there.
No, I'm just making a reference to the embodied cognition field in contemporary academic psychology. They say, they begin their arguments, or they're describing their position in distinction with Descartes. I say, well, Descartes was somebody who obviously didn't appreciate the body's role in thought, but he does, even in these passages.
He very much does. I mean, his very last philosophical work, The Passions of the Soul, it is all about that. It's the how the mind and body are in fact connected in such and such a way. So yeah, no, I would say very much respects that, and especially after the letter that was given to him by Princess Elizabeth, where that was kind of where people suspect the first time they really realized, oh, I do actually have a serious problem here, to which he went back and wrote The Passions of the Soul. So I think anyone that would say that he doesn't respect this hasn't read enough of Descartes, because he dedicated a lot to that. Mm-hmm. And this relationship between mind and body.
Yeah. But yeah, obviously for them, they're invested in having that position, because without that useful starting point, then it will be very hard for them rhetorically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's also, I mean, Descartes reconciles these two things in a very, it's a product of its time, to say the least, and his description of animal spirits and whatnot, and where he believed. But it's also at the same time a very if you just change a lot of the wording and how he's using it's not that far off. I mean, it's pretty far off, but it's not. You can see there is a logical process in the way he's thinking. There are reasons for why he thinks, when he's talking about animal spirits and this thing being filtered through the brain into the blood. He's just really talking about a nervous system that's interacting with the brain. Mm-hmm. And he's using a completely different language, one that would have been more suitable for his time. But other than that, it definitely can be seen progressing toward what we more so know today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So okay. Well, one other thing I wanted to mention. This is maybe more on the speculative side. I see some implications here on some let's say theological implications in this essay too. Very briefly, he talks about the parallels between how we understand our own freedom and the freedom of God. And if we understand our freedom primarily in terms of matching our actions with truth, whatever that comes, truth, goodness, justice, then that kind of reflects on how we understand God's freedom and the primacy of certain rules, and not the idea that maybe God, the creator, sets the rules and could have set the rules differently, could have created differently. So I know Sartre, as an atheist, doesn't really want to entertain that, but I just thought for us as an exercise, it would be interesting to expand the idea of a creator using Sartre's emphasis on the type of freedom that is creative, that is not just trying to live up to or to act up to the norms, how things ought to be, but really just create. So I was curious what you think.
There,
If you think it's like a futile.
that's a loaded statement. I'm not where to even I don't even know how I would approach that without giving it a lot of time to think about.
Yeah, maybe I think maybe it's just based on a misunderstanding of the task of this essay. But it's just one way, one direction that reading the essay can go. Because Sartre really is showing the connections between different sides of a philosophical position. How we
Yeah.
think about certain things, how they are connected to each other, how they shape each other. Our position on our theological position has these influences that we might not always be aware of in how we think about our own freedom. Like a father, like this is the analogy just came to me, a father who hasn't really followed his own dream, they are more inclined to not allow their children to also not follow their dream and say, oh, you should do what is right, you should do the safe, you should pursue a safe career. But somebody who has followed their passion, followed what they thought was their calling, they would allow others to do the same thing. So
Hmm.
that's kind of like, and they might not realize the link between what we do and how we perceive other people, how we think they should be living their lives. That link is not always transparent to us. Like I recognize other people's freedom because I have done that in my own life, or the opposite. I have suffocated my own capacity for freedom, and therefore, like I am now asking other people to do the same thing. That link, I don't think, is always transparent. And assuming that there is such a link.
Yeah, he states being in nothingness that one's freedom is recognized through their acts, and he puts a huge emphasis. It's hard to, in fact, to talk about Sartre's notion of freedom at all without mentioning the other and in our relationship to the other, which I think is something you're getting at here, or at least in part. And there's whole chapters on that we could go on for forever, but this does go off of kind of what you're saying in the sense of this primordial condition of action and creation, and in that act of freedom. And then I just have this random note here where it's similar formulas are innumerable in Sartre, and all coverage to prove that Sartre possesses, so to speak, a poetic, creative intuition of liberty, which discovers and asserts itself through the appearance of something new into a world which neither called for it nor refused it, through productivity, through creation. Which I guess, yeah, again, my mind's connecting this to what you just said, but the words don't come out in such a clear way.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong. I really love that note. It's in it, what you're describing in part is the indifference of the world. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
It is,
Well, go on.
it is not that. So in describing free agents, we here, even in this work, we read references to the capacity to be indifferent, to choose option A or option B. That indifference might be for some people a relative indifference, a condition of possibility for choosing one of many options. But on the other hand, we can describe the indifference of the world, and that indifference, like if to write a book or not write a book, the world doesn't care. The world is not asking and is not prohibiting. And so it is that indifference of the world is a precondition for us to really genuinely choose something, because our action is neither compatible nor incompatible with the
Yeah.
norms out there.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that plays very well to what sort of, you know, this intuition of liberty, or this intuition of freedom. You like that's just simply because of that indifference. It is an intuitive notion that we have that decision to either, as you say, write a book or not write a book. We just it is kind of, well, I wouldn't say it, like, well, yeah, I guess I just use the term intuitive. It is due because of that, or maybe not because, but as a result of that indifference.
I don't know if you can hear, but there are window cleaners in our building, and they're doing the cleaning a little bit too hard. And my cat is scared. He came to.
They're gonna break through.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of which, breakthrough. I'm wondering now, just if this kind of freedom, the indifference of the world that as we perceive it, at least, is a thing that applies mostly to new domains, like when we are a pioneer in something, when there's a field that, or a new field that doesn't have established norms yet. It is then that you can really act in this way, or maybe when you don't realize this indifference. So, for example, imagine I used to be in academia, and there was a real push. There was a real sense of almost urgency to write, publish. And there was that indifference of the world that you're describing. It wasn't there, or at least it was there, and it was like obfuscated, or I was confused. My vision of it was. So yeah, I'm kind of answering my own question. It is not just something that applies. It is something that we recognize more readily in a new domain, in a domain that is not cluttered with human norms and pressure, you know.
And I feel compelled to throw in this you know, this phrase that Sartre takes from Heidegger, being thrown into the world. When you talk about, you could almost say being thrown into a new domain without. It is almost, even if you say giving your example of being in academia, even though you put yourself in a position in which you could that would be goal orientated toward specific things in academia, you're still the unawareness of the publication, or that intuitive feeling of needing to get published, is still being thrown into a situation that, despite you might knowing a basic kind of world of academia, you're still thrown into that, because at the end of the day you learn as you go, of course. And so you have that no matter what field you throw yourself into, you almost have to act as that pioneer, as if it is a completely new domain. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And so to follow that, something that really obscures our view of our freedom, maybe leads us to underestimate our capacity for free action or new action, is when we think about ourselves with strict reference to other people. They say, oh, I want to be like them. I want to be, this is how I'm supposed to be.
Right. Yes, Sartre wouldn't have any of that.
Right. And Heidegger too, to some extent.
Yeah.
So this is why existentialism is so helpful.
Yeah, no, Sartre wouldn't be able to stand any of those phrases like, oh, I could have been a great actor, I could have been a
Right.
great musician. Like, no, no, actually, that's not true.
Hmm.
And I do like that approach. It does.
Or
Um,
being a musician, blah blah blah. This is how
yeah,
people talk like this a lot. Like as a parent, I'm supposed to like this or that, or as a writer, it's like no,
yeah.
nobody said that as an average writer, you're supposed to have these kind of demeanors or
Yeah.
this type
And
of
then
conduct.
that kind of thinking and that kind of way of living immediately throws one into what's sort of just called the bad faith, and then you're just living in that life in which can only really ever act as the thing in which you think you should be,
Hmm.
uh, which which of course is not restricting your freedom, but denying the freedom that you
Yeah,
have.
yeah. And that is where it really makes sense to apply that negative
Mhm.
freedom to say no,
Yes,
to refuse that.
yeah.
It becomes productive, right? It clears the way for the more meaningful engagement. Anything else that you wanted to bring in our discussion of this essay? And then I'll ask you uh, what might come next.
There is something I'm gonna have to think more on, which you said, I think was a great point, that just going through all these notes. I ended up writing so much on this that I don't. I wanted to organize it better before, because it's just so sporadic. But
I'm so impressed with your notes. You print them too, right?
well, yeah, these ones I printed. This is just about 10 pages I took from about a few hundred pages I've had written on mainly the one chapter, being in nothingness,
Mhm.
of chapter 5 there, of freedom. But so unfortunately, because of that, it's just so all over the place, and my mind's trying to jump from one thing to another, and it's like, and that's exactly how these notes read. So they didn't end up
Yeah.
being as helpful as I had hoped, but
No, that's fascinating. I always think about this, that at some point doing, if it's excessive enough, it acts just like not doing, right? It's like if I, um, like, you know, if I express love or affection to my wife, if I do it too much, it just
it's
starts to be so ineffective, and like it's just like not. It's like it becomes worse than if I didn't say anything at all.
yeah,
But and my
yeah,
yeah
that's
my notes tend to become that way too. When I'm writing something, when I'm working on a writing project, I tend to write notes on the side. I always have a side notebook, which I end up throwing aside. Uh, because like
that's why they're called side notebooks.
yeah, yeah. I always feel like it's absolutely essential to have that on the side of my official draft. But I don't know. This maybe it's serving a function that I'm not even aware of. Maybe it's
Yeah,
just
well,
easing my nerves.
it is. I mean, it's like learning when you learn, say, to play piano or guitar. You're very conscious of every single chord or note that you play. But after a few years, it is like doing nothing. You're not even thinking. You're just it just becomes automatic. And it's that's a very clear cut example of learning an instrument. But we do this with everything, as you say, when say loving someone, as you have that beginning phase where it's always expressed, but then as you kind of settle into it, it just becomes as this background, kind of almost as if it's not doing anything.
Right,
and,
right,
and
right.
it's
Well, um, yeah, this was great. This was great from my end, anyways. I mean, the point for me was to just start, try to see uh, how we do, and in video, looking at the video later.
You could definitely email. I do like the idea of bringing in the transcendence of the ego, because that's as far as Sartre goes, this is probably his most accessible work I've ever read, and it's just a fun read. It really, it's. Have you read it before?
I've started a few times, never got to the end. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's quite
Just
great.
like this. I thank you because you motivated me to. I mean,
Well, it's funny too, because
conversation.
it's funny
And then I'm
because
glad.
you mentioned it, and I saw your email the day that I had finished writing the script for it. So I had it right beside me, and I opened the email, and I've never heard anyone talk about this collection before. So it was it was a coincidence that it was on Sartre, but even a bigger coincidence on an unknown essay that I just so happened to finish writing on and have right beside me when I saw that email. So I was like, well, of course, like, I'm gonna have to do this.
Nice.
So
Nice.
so it worked out quite well.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yes.
I appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate it. This is great.
All right, Pei.
All right. You have a great rest of the day.
You too. Talk to you soon.
Keep in touch. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.